They cut down my trees while I was out of town, and for about 10 full seconds standing there in my own backyard, I genuinely wondered if I'd finally lost it. Not in the poetic dramatic sense either. I mean the real kind, the ugly kind where your stomach drops and your brain starts asking whether something you loved was ever there at all. Because the light looked wrong, the air felt wrong, and where there should have been shade, there was nothing but sun pouring in like somebody had ripped a wall out of my life. I knew those trees. Two of them I planted myself years ago, back when my shoulders still didn't complain every time I lifted a shovel and I still believed hard work fixed most things. The others had been there long before me, tall, old oaks, the kind that don't just sit on land, they define it. On windy nights, they sounded like the ocean, soft and restless, and in the summer they threw this cool, mottled shade across the back of the house that made the whole place feel tucked away from the world. They gave me privacy, yes, but more than that, they gave the property a kind of dignity, like it belonged to itself. And now they were gone. 4 fresh stumps, pale and raw, sat in the dirt like exposed bone. I live outside Asheville, North Carolina, just far enough from town that people still mostly mind their own business. That was the whole point when I bought the place 8 years ago. It backed up to a private golf course, which sounded fancy on paper but never meant much to me. I don't golf, never have. What mattered was the line of oaks along the back edge of my yard. They made a natural screen between me and the fairway. I could hear the occasional crack of a driver, maybe some guy cussing at his own slice, but I couldn't see them. And they couldn't see me. That mattered. I work from home, I keep weird hours, and I like peace more than I like people pretending to be friendly. Those trees were a buffer in every way that counts. Legal, physical, mental. They were the reason the place felt private. Then about 2 years ago, the course got sold to a development group out of Charlotte. Big money, polished trucks, shiny promises, the whole routine. You could feel the change almost immediately. Suddenly there were survey flags everywhere. New crews coming and going, clubhouse renovations, landscaping plans, rumors about luxury homes along the back 9. They kept using words like vision and community and elevated experience, which in my experience usually means someone's about to make a lot of money while everybody else gets told to be flexible. At first I ignored it. Their land, their business. Then one afternoon I got a knock at the door. I opened it and found this guy standing there, mid-40s, maybe expensive sunglasses, even though the sky was overcast, haircut sharp enough to file paperwork with. He smiled before he spoke, which immediately made me trust him less. "Daniel Cross," he said, sticking out a hand. "I'm managing the course redevelopment." I shook it, because my mother raised me right, even if life has spent years trying to beat that out of me. He glanced past me toward the backyard, toward the tree line, like he was already measuring what belonged to who. "We're doing some improvements along the fairway behind your property," he said. "New tee box, upgraded layout, better sightline, better player experience." I shrugged. "As long as it stays on your side." He laughed like we were two men sharing the same joke, which we were not. "Of course," he said. "Actually, that's kind of why I'm here. Those trees along the back edge, they're blocking the view from the new premium tee." I remember staring at him for a second, waiting for the part where he corrected himself. So I said. He kept smiling. "Well, ideally, we'd want a clear look down the fairway. It's part of the design." I said the only thing that mattered. Those trees are on my property. And to his credit, he nodded right away. "Totally understand. We respect boundaries." That should have been the end of it. 2 weeks later, I left town for a long weekend to see my sister in Tennessee. Nothing special, just family bad coffee on the interstate, the usual. I left Friday morning and got back Sunday evening, tired, half zoned out, thinking about a shower and sleeping in my own bed. The second I pulled into the driveway, something felt off. The house looked the same. Porch was the same gravel drive mailbox, still leaning like it had a personal grievance against gravity. But the place felt exposed somehow. Too open. Too bright. I walked around the side of the house, and the moment I hit the backyard, my brain caught up with what my body already knew. The shade was gone. I stopped dead. Where those oaks had stood, there was open sky. Sunlight blasted through a gap that had never existed before, and there at the back of the yard were the stumps, low clean cuts, fresh enough the wood still looked wet. I stood there so long I could hear the blood moving in my ears. I didn't yell, didn't call anybody, didn't do any of the movie stuff. I just stared. Through that new opening, I could see straight onto the golf course, and about 40 yards out sat a brand new raised tee box, perfectly positioned, with a clean, unobstructed line right into my backyard. That's when I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so shameless it almost deserved applause. I walked down near the cart path where a couple maintenance guys were working. "Hey," I called. Who told you to cut those trees? One guy leaned on his rake, gave me the kind of shrug people use when they've already decided they're not the one getting blamed. We were told to clear overgrowth along the boundary. Those weren't overgrowth, I said. Those were my trees. Another shrug. We just follow orders, man. And that was it. No apology, no surprise, no nothing. Just that dead little wall people hide behind when they know exactly what happened and plan on surviving it by acting dumb. That night, I dug out my old property survey from a drawer in the kitchen, spread it open under the light, and traced the back line with my finger. Those trees weren't on the edge. They weren't even close. They were well inside my property. And standing there with that paper in front of me, I felt something in me change. The anger didn't get louder. It got colder. Because now I knew this wasn't confusion. It wasn't a landscaping mistake. It was a choice. Somebody had looked at something that belonged to me, decided it was inconvenient, and removed it because they figured I'd be the kind of man who would sigh, complain to a friend over dinner, then move on. They got one thing right. I am quiet. But quiet and weak are not the same thing. The next morning, I called a surveyor named Pete Holloway. Older guy, gravel in his voice, sounded like he'd spent 30 years arguing with weather and winning often enough to stay cocky. I explained what happened, and there was this pause on the line, then a dry little chuckle. Let me guess, he said. Developer came in and started treating your line like a suggestion. Something like that. Yeah, he muttered. Seen that movie before. I'll be there tomorrow. Pete rolled in just after sunrise in a truck that looked older than some marriages I know. No nonsense, no fake sympathy, just a nod and straight to work. He measured checked angles, set equipment, compared my old survey to the land like he trusted dirt more than paperwork. I followed him around with coffee in one hand and a knot in my chest. After about an hour, he stood up, wiped his palms on his jeans, and said, "Well, you're not crazy." "Good to hear." He pointed toward the stumps. "Every one of those was at least 6 feet inside your property. Not even a close call." 6 feet! That's not an error. That's a decision with a budget. Pete planted bright orange markers all along the actual boundary, impossible to miss, then handed me an updated survey. "If this turns into what I think it's going to turn into," he said, "documentation's going to matter." Oh, I know. After he left, I walked the line again, slower this time. Took pictures of everything, the stumps, the markers, the distances, the angles, the view from the new tee box into my yard. I documented it like I was building a case, because I was. But proving they crossed the line was only half the battle. Being right doesn't always win. Being useful or dangerous or expensive, that wins. So I started digging. County filings, permit records, zoning notes, drainage approvals, all the dull, little bureaucratic papers most people would rather chew glass than read. And buried in the permit for that new tee box, I found the thing that changed the whole story. One sentence. Existing tree buffers adjacent to residential properties must be maintained to preserve safety and visual separation. I read it 3 times, then sat back in my chair and smiled for the first time since I'd gotten home. Because suddenly, this wasn't just my problem anymore. It was theirs. I filed a complaint with the county planning department that afternoon. No drama, no threats, just facts. Survey attached. Photos attached. Permit clause highlighted nice and neat. A week later, 2 county inspectors showed up, one younger guy with a clipboard, one older guy with that exhausted look government employees get when they've seen every version of human stupidity. I walked them through the yard. The older inspector, crouched by one of the stumps, ran his hand over the cut surface, then looked up at me. These were healthy trees. Yeah, I said, they were. We walked over to the new tee box, and standing there, the whole thing became painfully obvious. Without those trees, there was nothing between an errant golf ball and my backyard. Nothing. Just open air and wishful thinking. The younger inspector pointed downrange. "So a hook or slice from here could carry right into your property." Exactly. The older one sighed, the sigh of a man who is not remotely surprised. That, he said, is why the buffer requirement exists. 2 days later, a stop use order got posted on the tee box. Brand new structure, dead on arrival. I'd love to tell you I acted mature about it. Truth is, I walked out there that evening just to look at it. Golfers were standing around, confused staff was pretending not to know anything. And there in the middle of all that money and ego sat a beautiful, expensive problem with an orange notice slapped on it like a public insult. Then Daniel came back. Knocked on my door again, same polished clothes, same sunglasses, but the confidence had a crack in it this time. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Depends," I said. "You here to explain how my trees got mistaken for yours?" He tried the word miscommunication. I shut that down immediately. Then he shifted into solution mode. They'd plant replacements, he said. Fast-growing species restore the look, bring things into compliance. I laughed. Not mean, just honest. You cut down mature oaks, I told him. You don't fix that with baby trees and optimism. So I handed him a folder. Inside was an estimate from a professional landscaping company: mature transplanted oaks, reinforced root systems, immediate canopy coverage. And one more thing, a high-tension protective net system installed along the course-facing side of my property. He flipped through it slower with every page. This is expensive, I shrugged. So is a closed premium tee box. Right then, like the universe itself wanted a speaking part, we heard it thwack. A golf ball came sailing off the fairway, bounced once, then rolled to a stop in my backyard, maybe 10 feet from my back steps. Daniel turned and watched it settle in the grass. I nodded toward it. That your idea of overkill? He stared at the ball for a second too long. No, he said finally. That's not ideal. That was the twist right there, the moment the whole thing flipped. They wanted a cleaner view, a more premium experience, a prettier line down the fairway. And now the very view they'd created had become evidence against them. He asked what happened if they didn't agree. So I walked him out to the boundary markers and pointed to the line. Then I build my own solution, I said. 20-foot safety fence, steel posts, reinforced mesh, entirely on my property. His face changed. That would block the view from the tee. Completely. And you can do that. Already checked. That's the thing about people who run on confidence. They never expect the quiet guy to read the ordinances. But I had. Once they turned my yard into a hazard zone, I looked up every local rule that mattered. Safety barriers were allowed. Height restrictions got flexible when the issue was protecting residential property from repeated risk. And suddenly Daniel wasn't talking like a man negotiating from strength. He was talking like a man staring at an avoidable disaster when his investors and customers would see every time they pulled up to that pretty new hole. A giant fence tells a story. So does a stop-use order. 3 days later, I got the agreement in writing. Full plan approved. Mature oaks. Professional transplant. Root reinforcement. Irrigation. Netting. All of it. And I watched every minute of that work from my porch. If you've never seen mature trees moved, it's almost biblical. Cranes, heavy equipment, root balls bigger than hot tubs, crews moving around like surgeons trying to relocate time itself. One by one, those oaks went in. Not my original trees, no. Nothing gives you those back. But close enough that the yard began to feel like it could breathe again. And along the course-facing side, they installed the netting, tall, strong, almost invisible from a distance. The kind of barrier that doesn't need to shout to do its job. A couple weeks later, the county came back, inspected everything, and lifted the stop order. The tee box reopened. The golfers came back. The development kept rolling because of course it did. And me, I got my mornings back. Every now and then I stand out there with coffee in my hand, watching the light come through those leaves, listening to the wind move through branches again, and I think about how easy it would have been to lose that fight without ever realizing I had one. That's the part that stuck with me. Not the money, not the paperwork, not even the revenge, if we're being honest. It's this: something can mean the world to you and absolutely nothing to somebody else if it's standing in the way of what they want. And if you don't defend it calmly, clearly all the way through, the world will often take your silence as permission. I didn't sue them. Maybe I should have. Maybe I left money on the table. Maybe I let them off light. But I made them fix what they broke, and I made them do it on terms they would remember. There's a kind of justice in that. Not loud, not flashy, just solid. The kind that restores a boundary and leaves a scar where arrogance used to stand. Still, I think about it sometimes. Was making them repair the damage enough? Or should I have gone further and made the lesson hurt? Because there's a difference between correcting a wrong and punishing the people who felt entitled to commit it in the first place, and I'm still not sure where the line is. So let me ask you something. If somebody crossed onto your life, took something that mattered, then acted like it was just business, would you settle for fixing the damage? Or would you make an example out of them? Tell me where you stand. And if you've ever had to push back when somebody crossed a line, literally or otherwise, I want to hear that story too.